Yes, I'm literally talking about you training your judge to have self-awareness so it can kind of come to a new realization and grow out of its old pattern. Okay, this is your mind waking up, going from being a parasite to an ally. It's got to learn about what it's doing. Very uh, likely is and this is most people's experience, they don't experience the judge so much as because the victim response is so quick. It almost, well, actually does happen together. And so the judge saying, well, you're not doing that very well. It, in the dialogue, it may sound as I'm not doing that very well. Or that might be the actual language. I'm not doing that very well. And if you notice the emotional state that narrative puts us in. Ugh. And so we're in the victim persona and emotions with that judgment, and we experience it as a victim. And before we had a chance to notice any judge, but it was there, just almost like it just blows on it, the victim falls over. Like, okay, now you're on the ground. You know, didn't take a lot of suggestion for the victim to finish the response. And then what are we in that victim state? We are in the reactive emotions, and we're not going to notice that the judge is afraid or where it was, or that it's got a false sense of expectation, or that its intent is genuinely trying to help, but its execution is really harmful. We aren't going to notice those other things because in a victim state, we don't have the awareness of those things. All right. But the more you tune to kind of like pay attention to those aspects of the judge, the less you're in a victim relationship with it. So being aware of those aspects helps pull you out of that fallen down state. Right. Was there more with that, Jonathan? The not noticing it kind of principle. Yeah. Then one of the things to do, and this is why in the writing, you write about it afterwards. You're not going to notice it in the moment. You're in the victim state in the moment. You write about it later and go, what was that? What was said? What was felt? What characters did what? And then almost like playing the replay, and then you get this by writing, you get slow motion replay, and you're like, oh, there's where over time, you're like, okay, there's where the judge came in. I can see him now. Okay. So that's the benefit of writing after the fact. You can come in with some awareness and see what actually happened. Breaking it down in smaller parts. You're going to get various results. But the intent of this practice is to, well, let's be curious for one, see what happens, trial and error. Of course, everybody's dream of their mind character is going to respond differently. So you may have to modify this to what your judge particularly responds to well and doesn't respond to well. But it's how I want to experiment, want you to experiment with. It's different ways to call it. Call it stun the judge, wake the judge up, make the judge be self-reflective. Help the judge to be curious. Because the judge is operating in this bubble world. Just like we have our own bubble world, our characters have a bubble world. And as we described earlier, in that bubble world, like it was saying Josh is a 5-year-old little boy who's causing all the problems, right? That's who the real Josh is. Like that's the world it lives in. It's got a character that's 5 years old that he thinks is Josh and doesn't see the real Josh. Like that's how much of a state of illusion this inner critic lives in, right? It doesn't even know who you are, okay? And it can't get its pronouns right because it's calling the victim you, right? It can't, it would say you are screwing it up when it's not recognizing, oh no, that's an idea of Gary from memory when I was 5. And hey, I'm a grown man. You know, I don't need to do that emotional cycles of my 5-year-old, right? You can't tell the difference who I am and who the victim is that it's blaming, right? And it can't tell what's going on in the world because somebody asked me, hey, why did you do that? It immediately says, oh, you did that wrong, as opposed to, oh, this person wants to know why I did that out of curiosity. It's not a criticism. It can't tell. It interprets all things as criticism, if at all possible, right? So it's living in a bubble world. And we're used to engaging or relating to it as the victim because that's when it goes off, we react and we are conditioned to be in a victim state. So we're afraid of it. We feel shamed. We feel small. And we treat it as this know-it-all authority and are afraid of it, right? So our relationship to it is from generally the victim point of view. I was like, okay, so this past homework was, let's step outside of it. Let's see its ball of its world that it lives in, of all the kind of different things it uses, stories of expectations and perfection and victim that's inside its bubble world. Let's step outside all of that. Okay, let's step outside of its misuse of pronouns and identity and just watch this, all these little things that it does, its fears. And just so, okay, we see you, we acknowledge you, feel you, hear you. It's like, okay, I wanted you outside of its bubble and to practice that. Because now from this state that's not inside its bubble and not in the victim point of view, we want to start to put little holes in the bubble so it can see out. Okay, and start looking around and go, oh, what's going on? So I want you to write down a few of the things that you notice it criticizes you or criticizes the victim for, some way that it applies a self-judgment. I want you to write down the things that it is critical of you about, or directs those criticisms to the victim. Hey, how much homework you did or didn't do, you know, that your handwriting's sloppy, that you didn't practice your guitar this week, or how you reacted to something. Whatever it is, write down some of those things that it criticizes you about. Now the questions I want you to ask are going to be to the judge. And that judge may not be criticizing you of that topic right now. So you may want to use these questions more when it's actually happening. Instead of like, okay, or with like, okay, judge, I see you, I hear you, I feel you, okay. Acknowledgement, acceptance of it being it. Then you would come in with a question like, if my handwriting is really sloppy, the guys, your handwriting is really sloppy. The question I would ask would be, how neat is your handwriting? Tone, cadence, calmness matters. Okay, because if I ask, well, how neat is your handwriting? Right, who's asking the question? My victim and villain are together asking the question. I'm saying it trying to criticize and punish the judge, and now I'm creating a judge of the judge with punishment. Okay, so I want it to be a clean communication. Go back to when we were practicing clean communications. And so the communication is, okay, I see you, I hear you, Okay. And how much homework did you practice this week? That's the topic. Oh, you didn't do the homework. Okay, I didn't. And how much homework did you practice this week? Or did you practice the homework? When you ask that question, it's then time to be quiet and listen. Be quiet, calm, and listen, because you kind of want to take the question, put it in that inside that bubble, a question that's designed for the judge to kind of turn around and look at itself. And then you want to be quiet because you don't want to distract it so it looks at anything else. You want it to have time to sit with that. And if it's just quiet, confused, stunned, bewildered, perfect. You actually don't want it to answer. You don't want it to respond because now it's taken its attention and put it back on you. And you actually want it to ask, you want to ask you, right? Because if its attention's on you and then your attention goes onto you, it's not gaining any self-awareness. Yes, I'm literally talking about you training your judge to have self-awareness so it can kind of come to a new realization and grow out of its old pattern. Okay, this is your mind waking up, going from being a parasite to an ally. It's got to learn about what it's doing. And for that, it has to self-reflect. And for that, you have to have it put its attention on what it's doing. Okay. Now, very likely, it could resist this. And the way it's going to resist it is to snap back at you. Distract, deflect. It'll go, well, that's not the issue here. The issue is how much homework you did, Gary. Okay. It's going to push attention back onto me, and in the context of that story, well, I want to go, okay, I understand that's what you're asking, but I'm asking you this. Let's come back to this question first. How much homework did you do? And I might change it a little bit and go, are you practicing the homework right now? Again, loading my attention and its attention onto what's going on inside its bubble. And it will very likely try to redirect multiple times. It'll go, well, forget about that. That's not important. Let's go watch some TV. And it's like, actually, this is important. How much homework did you practice this week? You may have to ask the question 3, 4, 10 times. It may deflect and deflect and deflect, change the subject. After a while, this is a matter of your will and persistence, like you're trying to get a child to, go to bed. Like it's that child's will against yours, and you're going to have to hold your attention, be firm, be calm, and patient. And you actually don't need the judge to answer at all. It's an attention energy exercise that you want it to engaging. And it's your attention energy exercise to put your attention on that judge and hold it there. As much as it tries to distract you and go, but what about the victim? He screws everything up. Or, well, let's call the hero and they should fix it this way. Well, you should just go do more homework. And like, okay, have you practiced the homework this